All right, all guests on ZASLOW Show 2.0 brought to us by the official beer of the program, Johnny Cuba. European roots with that Caribbean soul, a refreshing German lager in a can. You know how we're going to get down this weekend with all the football action. I'll be on the couch in the Zaslow Mansion family room. Got a Johnny Cuba in my hand. Go pick up a six-pack of Johnny Cuba, your local Sedanos, Presidente, Winn-Dixie, Fresco y Mas. Always drink responsibly. And, of course, don't forget Johnny Cuba's mantra, stay tranquilo. You've heard him on ESPN Radio with myself, Mark Zinno. He's our betting expert today. We got to get the winning plays. Always good to have you on the show, Mark. I appreciate you doing this today. It's good to see you. And first, let's start out with not from a gambling perspective, all right? We'll get to all that good stuff. But Dolphins-Chiefs is a monster for us here this week. Give me some thoughts on, is this going to be the most watched game in NFL Network history? This, normally you're talking out there Sunday morning, London. I mean, this is Germany. You're getting the Jaguars and some shitburger team. This is Dolphins and Chiefs. This is Tua, Mahomes, Tyreek Hill against his old club. So give me some thoughts on how big this game is and what you feel about the Dolphins going into this game.
Well, I'll say this much. The NFL really tested their limits here with putting this game on for a 9:30 Eastern start, especially for everybody out on the West Coast. Who would have to be up at 6:30 to catch the opening kickoff of this game. I mean, that's a real hard sell to a lot of people. This should have been a Sunday night, Monday night game, and it would have, done the highest ratings of the year easily. All that said, look, I think that there is, from a perspective of the game itself, there's good reason why money is coming in on Miami. This thing opened at 2.5 down to 1.5, and I understand it. But this game isn't about two offenses, really. It's genuinely not. It's more about Miami's offense versus KC's defense and KC's offense against Miami's defense. Like, I think this total is a little bit inflated because of the names and the players and the guys in the back of the jersey. We're going to think this thing is going to be an old-fashioned shootout. I don't think that's going to be the case, honestly. I think I made this total for this game at 48.5, and it's at 50.5. It wouldn't surprise me if it gets to a key number of 51 as far as totals is concerned. But look at this. You have Patrick Mahomes, who played awful last week, and he's got the flu, flying overseas. Who the hell wants to fly for 8 hours when they got the flu? How miserable does that sound? So he's not 100%. We know that. And we also know that these games, remember, they're being played at odd times. I know teams fly over there, but there's so much new, right? It's just a new environment, new locker rooms, new field, new turf, everything. And so they tend to start out a little bit slower. That's just the way that the Europe games have gone. It's just hard for teams to score and get adjusted. Usually it comes in the second half. Now, the matchup part of this, is that, this Chiefs defense is really good. Fourth in total defense, second in scoring defense. And they help their team win because, shocking stat. Now, and I'll even ask you a question. Do you know how many turnovers the Chiefs have on the offensive side of the ball?
No.
16. That's third worst in the NFL.
Wow.
So look what their defense is doing. It's saving their ass on a weekly basis. And I say all that to say their defense is really good and we're not giving it enough credit. I would tell you their defense is playing better right now than their offense is. Mm-hmm. So every time we've seen the Dolphins step up in class against a good defense like we saw in Buffalo and Philadelphia, guess what? Hasn't gone well. They scored 20 or less in both those games. So I think the Chiefs will stifle the Fins here a little bit early. Now, they're the one team really that knows how to, I would assume they know how to defend Tyreek Hill because he played with them, so they know exactly what to do, and Andy Reid knows exactly what to do. That's really what it boils down to. But on the flip side, it's a Dolphins defense that obviously has some issues. I know that Jalen Ramsey is back, and that gives them a little bit of a lift, but still, this is not a good pass defense. And does one guy change that? We'll find out over the course of time. The real question is can they stop Kelsey? The Dolphins allow the third most receptions to tight ends this season, so they're going to have to find a way to keep him out of the offense and basically say, look, we'll let anybody else on this team beat us. Doesn't matter what the name on the back of the jersey is. Just don't let Kelsey do it. I don't really have a great feel for the side of the total. The Chiefs are always good in this spot from a standpoint of after Andy Reid has a loss and he's less than a field goal favorite, he usually comes out pretty well in those spots. So I would probably lean on KC. But again, I think the total in this game is inflated. I like the first half under 24.5.
If you had a vote for MVP, do you go Tua or do you go Tyreek Hill? It's normally a quarterback award, but Tyreek Hill right now is on pace for the greatest season receivers ever had, even if we want to do it on pace for 16 games.
Yeah, I mean, look, I would argue if it's not Tyreek Hill, And I would love to see a 5 or 6 game sample size if Tyreek was ever hurt of what Tua would look like. Because we all know it looked very different. But if it's not Tyreek Hill, it's probably A.J. Brown. It's probably a wide receiver at this point in time who deserves the MVP award in the NFL, not a quarter. There's no quarterback who's really shining this year. There just isn't. I told you about all the turnovers Mahomes has had. Allen's had his struggles. Burrow hasn't looked good yet. And Tua's playing the best of any quarterback out there. But, as much as we want to complain about the tush push, brotherly shove, whatever the hell you want to call it, Tyreek Hill is the same cheat code, man. Like you can't defend that guy unless you sell out to just, I saw a video earlier today on Instagram of the old days of Calvin Johnson, and the Saints lined literally 2 guys up against him in front of him. Like it was a punt, he was a gunner on the punt. Like that's what you have to do to Tyreek. And the mistake that people make, and when I watch Tyreek, and I've said this to everybody, you can't run right at him. That is the worst thing you can do because he's so quick and he can get around you so much faster. All you have to do is get him to pause and hope help comes really quick and just surround him. Like that's the only way to bring him down to and he's smart because he doesn't fight for extra yards. He goes out of bounds. He'll fall down as soon as contact comes near him.
Yeah, he doesn't take the
Guess
hits.
what? He keeps his body fresh and he keeps his body fast. He's not looking for an extra 2 yards at the lower shoulder. Anybody guy goes down and goes to live another play, and no one ever.
Yeah, without the not the same speed, but there's a very Marvin Harrison element to him where Harrison never took hits.
No, that's why he played as long as he did and was as productive as long as he was. So, it's really tough to defend Tyreek. And I sometimes you watch and I just go, thank God I don't got to play that guy.
All right, let's get to some winning plays here. I'll ask you about a couple of the local teams here. And then you give me your best plays. Do you feel any kind of way about the Hurricanes this weekend? The Hurricanes it's been a really weird 3 weeks for them down here. A couple overtime wins. You have that disaster a few weeks ago against Georgia Tech. North Carolina State, they're on the road this weekend. They're a 5-point favorite. Do you feel any kind of way about the Canes?
I like NC State. I hope your audience doesn't hate me. It's not a good spot for Miami, and they've been too inconsistent. NC State is a team that, still has a decent defense. You get Miami on the road here for a night kickoff in Raleigh. It just, the number laying 5.5, typically a dead number in football, both college and the pro. I'll take NC State with the points. I think Miami might be able to win the game by a field goal or 2 points, but I wouldn't lay it with Miami.
Now, you've loved FSU all year. FSU looks like they're a 21.5-point favorite at Pitt this weekend. Do you feel like FSU covers that?
They should. Look, I have a ticket in my back pocket to FSU to win the national title, sitting at 9-1. I got it the second week of the season and didn't wait because there was no reason to wait. I knew that this team was going to really be unchallenged for a better part of the year. So I had no issue backing Florida State. Pittsburgh, I think their gas has run out. They had that win over Louisville. And they played well last week. And guess what? This is where the steam runs out for Pitt. Now, the problem with Florida State is that they don't have to be pushed really hard to beat teams like Pitt. So they can sleepwalk their way through this game and end up not covering. They're not going to lose the game. If they lose the game, God, my national championship ticket would be burning. But, so they don't have to be necessarily great. What I typically like to do in games like this, right, is just cut the game in half. Because here's the deal. If Florida State isn't winning by 14 at half, then why would I believe they're going to – I don't want to just trust that all of a sudden a second half outburst is going to come and they're going to end up putting 5 more touchdowns up on the board. So teams are more motivated in the first half. What happens is if they get a lead, then they sort of peel back a little bit. They start to play reserves or just take their foot off the gas, run the ball, punt it away, allow the other team to stay in the game. Similar to what they did against Boston College, right? Mm-hmm. Like we forget that was a 31-10 game in the fourth quarter. And they just kind of, it's Boston College, we'll be okay. And Boston College kept fighting. And next thing you know, it's a 2-point game and it looked a lot closer than it really was. So I would take Florida State in the first half and lay the points.
All right, let's hear what your best plays are for tomorrow.
Oh, God. Big college card tomorrow. I'll tell you what. Listen, USC is winning outright. Washington has been playing with fire for 4 weeks now. There's an argument they could have lost all of their last 4 games. Certainly, we know they should have lost to Oregon. If Dan Lanning wasn't a putz, they would have lost to Oregon. That much we know. We know they should have lost to Arizona State. If it wasn't for like a 92-yard pick six as Arizona State was going in for a go-ahead score, they don't win that game. And then last week against Stanford, of all teams, they got a 2-point lead in the fourth quarter, and Stanford has the ball with 5 minutes left and can't get, in a position to kick a game-winning field goal. They score, I think they get a pick six or turnover on downs, and Washington scores a garbage touchdown, makes it a 9-point game. So this is a situation here where Washington and Michael Penix has not been right. He's been injured since the Oregon game, and he hasn't looked good. He got injured in that game, and he just hasn't looked the same. Like, he's not the same runaway Heisman guy that we thought he was 3 or 4 weeks ago. And USC is fighting for their season here. I mean, look, they win this game and sets up next week as an elimination game with Oregon. Loser will be out of the Pac-12 championship and headed to a New Year's Six bowl, right? If not less than that. So I think that USC plays with a sense of urgency, and this is not exactly a Washington defense that you need to be scared of. Last team to have the ball wins probably, but I think it's USC. I think them at home really comes out on top here. A couple other games that I like. Iowa State at Kansas. Oh, I'm sorry, Kansas at Iowa State, rather. This is one of these situational spots that you scream for as a gambler, right? You have Kansas coming off an outright upset win over Oklahoma last week, snapping an 18-game losing streak to the Sooners, and they celebrated like they just won a college basketball national championship. They're now going to head to Ames, Iowa, which is where a lot of Big 12 teams go to die, for a night game against a Cyclones team that they haven't beaten in Ames since 2008. Kansas also hasn't won back-to-back conference games since 2008.
Wow.
Lance Leopold, Jayhawks 2-5 straight up, and ATS away in Big 12 games when coming up a straight-up underdog win. Cyclones, 9-2 straight up, 7-4 ATS, including 5-0 straight up and 4-1 in Ames, Iowa, in this series. So when they play in Ames, they end up dominating Kansas. I don't think Kansas has the emotional capacity to play up 2 weeks in a row like this. There's a reason why Iowa State is favored against a, quote, ranked team. We all know Kansas is not a ranked team, right? Like, literally, name the best 25 teams in the country. Kansas is not there. So you get this situation here where you get an unranked team favored against a ranked team coming off a big win. Situationally screams Iowa State, rather. Give me less than a field goal. Love it there. I know a lot of people don't want to jump on this, but I will. Alabama, I'm going to lay the 3 with them. Second consecutive revenge spot for Nick Saban. In revenge spots, he's 17-1 straight up and 12-6 against the number, including last game against Tennessee, where he avenged a loss last year in Knoxville. This game isn't about what you think it's about. This game is literally about an LSU defense that won't be able to stop Jalen Milroe and a passing offense that's getting better every week. Look, Alabama, in reality, Zaz only has to get 2 or 3 stops, because you know how many stops that LSU's defense can get? Like 0. They can't stop anybody. So if Alabama plays mistake-free football and doesn't put themselves in positions where they're behind the sticks often, they're going to win this game. This is an absolute revenge spot that Saban is salivating over. And guess what? The only time the same quarterback has beaten Saban in back-to-back years hasn't happened since he was at Michigan State. So Jaden Daniels is going to try to do it 2 years in a row. Not happening. Give me Bama. I'll lay the 3 at a good number. And here's another one. Oregon, team total over 41.5. There are different numbers out there. You can probably play this a bunch of different ways, but like Oregon is in juggernaut mode right now. They're averaging 45 points a game. That's the 3rd best in the country. They're going up against a Cal defense that's giving up 480 yards of offense and 43.2 points per game over the last 5 weeks. They've also allowed at least 50 in 3 of the last 5 games. So unless the Ducks make a litany of mistakes, I think they clear this number. Even if you take out the 81 points that they scored against Portland State at home, they're still averaging 45 points a game at home. I think the Ducks pour it on this one. Cal's defense is not as good as it was earlier in the year. And Oregon, even though you could argue it's a look-ahead spot with USC on deck next week, they are too good right now. And Bo Nix should be the Heisman favorite, even though he's not. That's where I am on the card this week. I'll throw one more at you real quick with a very short handicap.
All right.
Vanderbilt getting 12.5 at home against Auburn. Zaz, there isn't a planet and a galaxy anywhere where Auburn should be laying 12.5 points to anybody, any Power 5 team on the road. Their offense is putrid. It's absolutely putrid. I don't think Vanderbilt wins this game, but if they get to 17, they'll cover this number.
Let's get a couple of your good plays for Sunday as well. NFL Sunday. Obviously, we talked a little about Dolphins Chiefs. You lean toward the Chiefs. You don't necessarily love it. You lean toward the under as well. What are some What are some of your better plays for Sunday?
Dallas Cowboys +3. They win the game. Look, I don't think the Eagles are as good as their record suggests, and they're certainly not as good as they were last year. Like, peel back the layers a little bit. Look, they had a blowout win over the Bucs, okay? And they beat the Dolphins pretty handily. But other than that, they've been pushed to the limit twice by the Commanders, barely escaped over the Patriots in week 1, and they got 4 turnovers from the Vikings in week 2 to help them win that game. And then they only managed 6 second-half points over the Rams in a 3-point game to pull away. And then they lose outright to Zach Wilson and the Jets. Like, did the Eagles really strike you as a team that separates from everybody all that well? They don't. I think the Cowboys are in full mode where they could take advantage. Other than the blowout loss of the 49ers, the Cowboys have outgained every single opponent that they've played this year. They're 6-1 straight up and ATS in their last 7 division games as a road dog of fewer than 4 points. Mike McCarthy is a head coach since taking over in Dallas, 6-1 straight up, 5-2 against the number in division games against teams with a better than 500 record. And Dak Prescott, get this in his career, 27-7 straight up, 24-10 ATS in division games, including 7-1 straight up and against the number during the first half of the season when Dallas typically has been a lot better earlier in the year. So I like the Cowboys here, even though the game is in Philly. I still think it's a spot where Dallas could take advantage of an Eagles team that isn't as good as we all thought, or their record, 7-1 record says they are. I'll take the Bills on Sunday night. I think they're a better team than the Bengals. And the Bills are in a massive revenge spot from that game in the playoffs last year in the snow where they didn't play well. I hope Sean McDermott is smart enough to just let Josh Allen do what he wants to do and let him play a little backyard football and take off and run and just create havoc. He's not a guy you want to put shackles on, right? Let the offense come to him, so to speak. And the Bengals, they're not really clicking yet. I mean, look, they had that bad start, and I know they get a big win over the Niners last week, but it's one of those things where, they might have put all the emotional energy into winning a game. It felt like they had to win against the Niners against a banged up Niners team. And now they got to welcome a Bills team that's probably a little bit more motivated to win than they are at this point in time. So give me the Bills. It's a short enough number. You could take them on the money line. If you feel like taking the 1.5, 2, whatever the number is, go ahead and do it. And this one's kind of gross. I fully admit it. And it's not a game that I would normally play because I don't really ever bet on the team that I root for.
Let me hear it.
To admit that I root for the New York Giants, but I'm taking the Giants against the Raiders here. There's a couple of things at play. One, Daniel Jones is coming back, and say what you want about Daniel Jones, and the narratives out there about him, I think, are genuinely, off. That said, he's still a clear upgrade from Tyrod Taylor and Tommy DeVito, who was stunk at Illinois and now stinks in the NFL. Good for him that he's got an NFL contract, but guess what? That's not an NFL quarterback. So he's clearly an upgrade there. I know the Giants traded away some players and everything that looks like kind of they're selling on the season and everything else, but those are usually buy low spots on teams that you can take advantage of. Leonard Williams, a great player. The Giants defense overall hasn't really been part of the problem this year. It's been more of their offense than anything else, even though their secondary stinks. But is this a Raiders team that can take advantage? Like, typically when a team fires a coach, I always look at it one of two ways, and I always usually pause a week, right? Because there is one of two things that happens. The energy ticks up, team plays well, right. They go out and get a win that nobody expects them to get, or they just get their doors blown off because the wheels are completely come off the wagon and everybody's gone. Some of that depends on the time of this season, right? If the firing comes in the last 4 games, usually that's when everybody's off the wagon. No one gives a rip and everything's gone. You're still at the midway point. So I lean towards the uptick in energy as we've seen, but that doesn't involve a change in quarterback. If Jimmy Garoppolo was still quarterbacking this team, I would absolutely play on the Raiders. He's not. Aiden O'Connell is another guy who's probably not an NFL quarterback. I'll take the Giants here as a dog on the road in a spot where I just think that, the Raiders probably shouldn't be favored really against anybody at this point. It's hard for me to buy on the Raiders as a favorite. So situationally, I'll take the Giants and I'll take the 2 points. And, this is one of these games where I'm probably not even going to watch it. Just going to hold my nose and look away, get my phone for a score and go, please tell me this is working out in my favor because it's going to be ugly.
Excellent job here, Mark. Lastly, not gambling related, NBA in-season tournament is tonight. I'm trying to work myself into caring about it. I guess I'm a game time decision whether or not I'm going to actually care more about it than a regular season game. Are you into it? How do you feel about it?
I totally forgot until I saw it labeled on an app, or it was ESPN's app, or whatever it was. I'm like, oh, they're starting that stupid tournament thing. Does it matter? No, I'm not. I mean, I'm only looking at it. I'm not gonna lie. I'm only looking at it from a gambling perspective. Like, I don't think anybody really actually cares who wins this in-season tournament. There's not really an incentive other than money, right? Like, it would be one of those things where if it's kind of like Survivor, if you were granted immunity, like if the winner of the in-season tournament was automatically guaranteed the 8 seed, like that to me would be something like, okay, or at least being in the play-in tournament, right? Like, you can't finish worse than 10th, right? If that was, there would be a lot more on the line for teams to actually give a rip, to know that, hey, no matter what, we know we can, at least we'll be playing in the postseason. And I wonder how that would actually affect teams going forward. But regardless, my point is that, like, there's just not enough. I don't think there's enough incentive for the players to treat it any different than a regular game, right?
It can have an adverse effect, what you just mentioned there too, because I thought about it as well. But if it guarantees you, like, let's say it guarantees you at least the 6 spots, you could avoid the play-in. Well, if you're not such a great team, you may rest your guys the final week of the season, because even though you're currently 10th place, you're going to get 6th. So it could do the opposite,
10th, right? That's why I say you would only get 10th. You know that you would have to be on the road for a play-in game, that if you lose, you go home. And that way, there's only one team really getting robbed in there, right? So, like, if the Spurs are at the bottom of the Western Conference, and they're guaranteed the 10 seed because somehow they win the tournament, the only teams that are mad are, like, whoever the 10 seed, the Pelicans, right? That's the only team that's really upset about the whole thing. So I don't know. Again, when I look at player motivation in this spot, Zaz, I go, I don't know if they'll treat this any different than a regular season.
Yeah, I don't know either. We'll find out.
There's a couple of interesting lines out there tonight. I will say this much. You have the winless Memphis Grizzlies laying 3 on the road to Portland. And someone explained to me why the Dallas Mavericks, who are undefeated, are catching 7 points from the Denver Nuggets.
It's in Denver, I'm assuming? Has to be.
Yes.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I guess because Kyrie is still out. I mean, I'm not a fan, but I guess that's why.
I mean, Jamal Murray is a game-time decision. Like, what? Is somebody not playing in this game? And that's what I have to wonder about this tournament thing. Is that shading the line in any size, way, shape, or form? Yeah. I don't know. I don't know if odds makers really have I'd have to talk to a bookmaker, but I don't know if they've ever accounted for this tournament being anything. So those are 2 lines that jump off the page at me. Probably take the over in Dallas, Denver. And as bad as Memphis has been, Portland might be the worst team in the league this year. They don't have a lot of shooting at all, and they can't get to 100.
I mean, all we heard is how much they hate Tyler Hero. Tyler Hero right now has been amazing so far this year for the Heat.
Yes. Well, again, that's another line. That's 9.5 for Miami. Washington's defense is terrible, but
Washington is such a joke. Washington is so bad.
I know. Can Miami score in this game? Like that. The other thing, there was another one that interested me. Like, I would have to say that the Heat would have to get to 115 on their own.
It'll be tough.
Yeah, that's what I said. Like, can Miami put up 115 against a bad one? And here's the thing, because Washington is so bad, Miami doesn't have to push the pace to score. Right? Like, they could just comfortably win this thing 105, 98 and not worry about it.
Yeah.
So that was a bigger total than what I had expected in that game. If it was in the teams, like 217, 218, I'd be like, okay, let me hit the over. Miami will get to 110 on their own and we should be good. But no, yeah, I don't, I don't know what to think about Miami.
We'll see. I don't know if I'm going to care extra about the game tonight. I don't know. Like, it's going on. They're going to have the new courts. Like, oh, okay.
They got new courts for this too?
Oh, yeah. Every court tonight you'll see it's like a new design on the courts. Yeah, they're trying to doll it up this tournament. They want it to look fancy. You'll see. It's going to look a little bit different. I don't know. I'm a game time decision if I care more about these games tonight. I don't know. Mark, excellent job. Tell everybody how they can catch you, how they can see you on social media and get all your picks. Go ahead.
Yeah, on Twitter and IG at Mark Zinno, MarkZinno, over at Wager Talk at Sports Memo as well, and Sports Grid TV, YouTube, Sirius XM channel 159.
Great job, Mark. Good catching up with you, man. I appreciate it.
Same to you, brother. You're the best.